Welcome to the Vanishing Twin Syndrome podcast, the podcast dedicated to exploring the complex and often overlooked realities of vanishing twin syndrome. I'm Dr. Nicole Cubbage, your host, and whether you've experienced this phenomenon firsthand, are supporting a loved one, or are simply curious about this unique aspect of twin and multiple pregnancies, you're in the right place. Vanishing twin syndrome is a medical mystery that affects countless families, yet it remains underdiscussed in both scientific and personal circles. Through this podcast, we'll bring you expert insights, personal stories, and discussions on the emotional, medical, and even spiritual implications of losing a twin in utero. Each episode, we'll talk with researchers, healthcare professionals, and those with lived experiences to shed light on what it means to be a twinless twin, how this loss shapes identity, and the latest advancements in understanding this phenomenon. So, whether you're here to learn, connect, or find support, we're honored to have you join us on this journey. Let's start the conversation. With me today, I have Miss Brittany Walker. Brittany, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. So tell me, how did you first come to hear of vanishing twin syndrome?
Well, that's kind of interesting. The actual term I heard about Googling what happened to me. So I initially learned that I was a vanishing twin at 19 when my mom told me. But she didn't use the term vanishing twin, but I just found that, Googling like similar situations. But she said basically that I had been a twin and that my twin had died at some point during her pregnancy. And she didn't really seem to have like a lot of information herself. Like, I don't think the doctors really gave her a lot of information at the time.
And what was the term, if I may ask, that your mom used? Was it perhaps like a blighted ovum or?
Nothing like that. She just said that I did have a twin and that they had died before we were born. She didn't really have any medical terminology for it.
Did she know the timing of death and gestation of your twin?
I'm not really sure. Unfortunately, my mom passed away about a year after the initial conversation where she told me. So a lot of the questions that I've come up with since, like when exactly she lost my twin, she's not around to answer anymore.
I apologize.
So
Yeah.
yeah, the first year was just kind of like me emotionally processing things, and then by the time I started having a lot of those more specific questions, there was no one around who had the answers anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It's very unfortunate. That must have been challenging for you.
It was. Um,
Were you able to speak to a provider at all? And I know, by the age that you were that you found out, you may have been still, but you probably weren't seeing a pediatrician anymore, correct?
no, I wasn't.
Were you able to discuss this with your provider at all, if I may ask?
Um, it's never really come up. I know that there were health issues that I had that through research I've realized were connected to it.
Mhm.
So it is probably something that I should talk to a doctor about at some point, but it just never really came up.
Did you
So,
ever speak to any other types of providers?
no. I kind of, I don't know. I never really sought out therapy on it, and maybe I should have, But I kind of worked on processing it myself, and eventually I joined a support group online. But I haven't actually sought any um, mental health providers. I know that through like other conversations I've had with some of the people in the support group, depending on where you're at, a lot of mental health providers still don't recognize it, and so it can be very difficult to find someone.
Yes. Yeah, that is a common trend that I've observed in my own research and my own experiences with vanishing twin syndrome. There's certainly a very small community surrounding this. And that's one reason, why I'm doing this podcast is to help kind of spread the awareness and spread the stories of those that have been impacted by it. Because one great individual said to me one time, this individual is an amazing researcher and also a doctor. He mentioned that the world is not short on citations. The world is not short on many studies, although there are many things that still need to be studied. We have quite a lot of research that has been produced, and we have quite a lot of medical guidelines. But the issue is actually getting that information into the clinic where it truly matters. And so, one of the ways, that many researchers like myself have thought about trying to improve this is through provider education. But provider education only goes so far as well. And we've seen, that mandating, continuing education or even offering optional training or, optional guidelines to read is going to yield a very low rate of people who actually read them, right? Or choose
Right.
to visit those materials. And so by telling the stories of people, the hope is that providers will themselves have more of a personal desire and initiative to want to learn. And through my experience as an educator and a mother, I have seen that want is really a huge determining factor for effective learning. Not just actually going to learn the material, but then retaining it in the long term afterward. If there's really no personal connection that is made there in some way, I find that all too often that kind of goes in one ear and out the other, right? So,
Yeah.
what questions, may I ask, do you still have remaining that have not been answered?
Well, like you said, I don't know, exactly what part of the pregnancy I lost my twin. So, there's always that's kind of nagging in the back of my head because it would be good to know. Um, there are like the kinds of questions that I don't really think like anyone can answer that like, if she had been born, would I have been born first? Or would she be the older twin? There are those kinds of questions that, nobody can really answer or give, any information on. We can only speculate.
Right. May I ask, did your mother ever convey any information on how the twin died? Were any of the remains of the twin still present at birth, or did your twin completely vanish before the birth?
That's one of those things that I really wished I had asked her because it it seemed to me that there may have been some remains, but most everything else seems to line up with vanishing twin syndrome and like her having been died before there would have been any remains left. So I'm really not sure. And like I said, I think like given the time and where the medical industry was at that point, I don't know that she even really knew. Like she seemed to have some confusion around it herself. So
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, there
She
is
said she never saw any remains. So she seemed to be under the impression that there may have been remains, but the doctors disposed of them without like her ever getting a chance to say goodbye. So I got the impression that she didn't really have closure in that aspect.
interesting.
But she
And
may have also just been confused and not and there not have been anything there for her to say goodbye to, you know.
yeah, one thing I know that many people have the option to go back to is sometimes there's a pathology report that's made when a placenta sometimes has an abnormal finding. It often gets sent off for pathology, especially with these days. They're compared to 19 years ago, you still may have had some results that you might be able to go and obtain. I don't know, what hospital you were born at, and no need to disclose that on the podcast. But if you maybe go back to them, they may have some medical records that you could find something out, or if the provider that delivered is still practicing, they may be able to answer some questions that you have. um your your mom, and I don't know for sure if you could do this because she is deceased now, but she may have some obstetric records that you may even be able to obtain by going back to her providers and providing a death certificate and saying, hey, this information could be relevant to, my own healthcare. Would it be possible for me to try to obtain, some of that information? And they may have something, that's kind of at that time in history where we were kind of converting to digital records and everything was, no longer really, they were ceasing the paper. You may find that could give you some information.
I do have a pretty strong inclination that I was an identical twin. My mom wasn't sure. Um, she didn't know the gender of my twin, but she said from things that I had said as a child and from some of my own childhood memories, I kind of have that like strong inclination that I was. And also it medically made sense because my mom had fertility issues.
Mm.
She wasn't supposed to be able to get pregnant without treatment, and I was the 1 in a million pregnancy that wasn't supposed to be able to happen. So it seemed like that also lined up with an identical twin. So I have a pretty strong like suspicion that that's what the case is, but having the option to like check and possibly find out for sure is always nice.
Yeah. Now, this is, something that a lot of people, they claim that, when they're younger, they one way or another sense the presence of their multiple that has passed. May I ask, was that true in your case?
I had an imaginary friend that was identical to me and very specifically exactly my same age. I actually had, and this was something I realized, as an adult, that this was something that, was like my subconscious trying to, tell me or what have you. But when I was a kid, my best friend was 2 months younger than me, and that bothered me. It bothered me that we were not exactly the same age, that there was 2 months difference.
So what is your main take home message as a survivor of vanishing twin syndrome?
Oh boy. Um, that you're really not alone.
Yeah.
Because it can seem, especially like with the psychological side effects, like you feel alone. And there are other people out there who are going through the same thing. So I guess that would be my take home, would be you're not alone.
Yeah, that's right. And despite how, how little information we still have, and how seemingly small of a community this is, it's actually not that small of a community. And there are resources out there and other people out there to connect with that have gone through similar things. So, yes, thank you. Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Brittany. Your insights as a survivor are so important for advancing care surrounding vanishing twin syndrome, and I greatly appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate what you're doing.